Hello, people. Welcome to video 5 of Analyzing the Golden Plates Eyewitnesses, where we break down every single eyewitness to the Book of Mormon. And in today's video, we are looking at Isaac Hale. He was Joseph Smith's father-in-law, his landlord, and arguably his biggest secular critic. Standard disclaimer, I'm a Mormon skeptic, so sorry for the bias, and check description for my sources. Isaac Hale lived in Harmony, Pennsylvania, and had a front row seat to the critical translation period of Joseph Smith's life, from the treasure-seeking expeditions of 1825 to the production of the Book of Mormon in 1828 and 1829. Hale was not a believer and was adamant about it. Research points to only one primary document where Hale speaks for his experience, along with testimonies from corroborating eyewitnesses. Now, before Isaac Hale ever witnessed a translation, he witnessed Joseph Smith's folk magic career. In 1825, a young Joseph Smith was hired by a farmer named Josiah Stoll to use his gift to locate a legendary Spanish silver mine. The crew traveled to Harmony, Pennsylvania, and boarded at Isaac Hale's house. Hale notes that Smith would look for treasure by putting a stone into a hat and putting his face into the hat. Sound familiar? That's because that's the exact same way everyone had said Joseph Smith translates the golden plates. And guess what? Joseph and his buddies couldn't find any treasure this way. Shocker, I know. According to Hale, Joseph said he couldn't see through the stone because of an enchantment. And it turns out this guy said similar things. And after this, Joseph Smith apparently booked it, leaving Isaac Hale with an unpaid debt of $12.68. Eventually, Joseph comes back around and asks Isaac's permission to marry his daughter, Emma Hale. And Isaac says no because he doesn't like that Smith is a treasure digger. But because Smith is such a nice guy, he decides to not listen and marry Isaac's daughter anyway. And when Isaac finds out, he's devastated. Joseph promised he would quit this peeping thing and start working normally and not looking for treasure. And Emma's brother Alva even helped them move down to Pennsylvania. But the second Joseph and Emma were safely settled on Isaac's property in late 1827, the truce was broken, and it seemed as if Joseph's gift for seeing through the stone had suddenly returned, and he had brought a book of plates with him. Hale documented the exact translation process he observed in his home, stating that Smith translated the exact same way he hunted for treasure, with a stone and a hat his face was pressed up against. But Isaac was actually allowed to hold the box the plates were in, but was not allowed to look inside said box, which cured none of his skepticism. Isaac eventually got so fed up he issued an ultimatum and ordered Joseph to remove the plates from his house completely. So now let's look at the bias in maybe some of the interviewers and the witnesses. Before we just take all these quotes at face value, we have to look at the man behind the mic, Dr. Philastus Hurlburt. He was a former Latter-day Saint who got excommunicated for immorality and was then hired by an anti-Mormon committee to gather damaging affidavits about Joseph Smith. He handed them over to Eber D. Howe, who published them in his 1834 book, Mormonism Unveiled. And funny enough, even Howe allegedly viewed Hurlburt as an unreliable fellow. Because Hurlburt was financially and personally motivated to destroy Smith, historians have to ask, did he coach these witnesses, exaggerate their claims, or put words in their mouth to sell more books? It's impossible to tell exactly how much is truth versus exaggeration. But let's look at Isaac Hale. Joseph Smith hadn't paid his debt, he stole Emma by eloping, and he broke a direct promise to quit the peeping business. So this guy is pretty pissed with Joseph Smith, and that's probably definitely feeding into his interview. But did Isaac lie about the translation mechanics? Probably not, because the description of the hat and stone perfectly matches what the faithful believers said. But you can tell in the way Bro describes Joseph Smith, he didn't like him one bit, and he ultimately remained a disbeliever until his death. And then there's Peter Ingersoll. He claimed that Joseph Smith explicitly admitted the golden plates were actually sand, tied up in a frock, and acted like he fooled his family. Most LDS advocates discredit this, and even skeptic historians are divided. This specific claim screams of Hurlburt's influence. But what about the arguments themselves? Apologists unironically kind of like Hale as a witness. Hale absolutely hated Joseph Smith and thought the translation was a massive delusion, but his description of the stone and hat method corroborates other friendly accounts. Plus, Hale admitted that he felt the physical weight of the box containing the plates, so it shows the plates weren't some hallucination. And they can say that Dr. Philastus Hurlburt heavily coached these angry relatives and twisted their words just to sell copies of his anti-Mormon book. Now, the skeptic looks and sees that there's a direct line between Joseph Smith's life before and after the plates, and it looks like Smith just repurposed the rock and hat from his folk magic days to his starting a new religion days. So, if using the stone to find treasure was a known fraud, then using the exact same stone to dictate scripture is just an evolution of the same exact con. They also look at the super sketchy timeline. Joseph Smith said he was done with his peeping days, and he tells Isaac, Alva, and Ingersoll that he couldn't actually see through the rock in order to help secure a place to live. But the second Joseph was safely settled on the Hale property, the gift miraculously returned. A skeptic looks and sees a guy who's willing to say whatever he can to survive, kind of like Marty Supreme. And on top of that, Isaac couldn't even see what was inside the box, which was the main point of contention. Before I give my final verdict, I always want to emphasize that you should look at the source documents yourself and form your own conclusion. But here's where my personal opinion lands. I don't believe the Book of Mormon is divine, and Isaac Hale's testimony reinforces that for me. Now, to be fair to the apologist, there is a massive amount of bias in these interviews. Dr. Hurlburt was a man with a vendetta, and that rightfully brings the validity of these witnesses into question. But there just isn't enough hard evidence to assume all these frontier farmers were outright lying. But we can infer embellishment. But that's what also makes it hard because no one can definitively say what has or hasn't been embellished. Between Isaac, Alva, and Ingersoll, I think only Ingersoll is the one whose story is explicitly embellished. But I would personally trust the rest to a degree. But I don't think that these interviews are 100% objective from either the interviewees or the interviewer. It's impossible to say with absolute certainty what is exaggeration and what is fact. However, I also think it's incredibly unwise to throw the whole collection out. I personally take the stance of most modern historians that these affidavits are not entirely fabricated. They do provide insights into how people viewed Smith, and I trust the core historical reality they present. But I also acknowledge that these accounts likely contain exaggeration, hearsay, and probably some sensationalized details, making them closer to targeted propaganda than neutral journalism. So I side with the apologists here and not taking every single dramatic quote at face value. But I also just don't see reason to discredit the entire historical foundation that they provide. Does this disprove Joseph Smith? No. There's still some genuine questions here, though. Like, how did he actually dictate this massive book? And how much of these testimonies are embellished? But for me, I personally operate off of the legal standard of beyond a reasonable doubt. And so while there are apologist answers for why Joseph continued to use the seer stone, I would say there's absolutely reasonable doubt here. And it is entirely reasonable to assume Joseph simply repurposed the stone from his past folk magic and that the con man ultimately had nothing real to show inside that heavy box. It has not been proven beyond a reasonable doubt, and that is why I, for now, remain a skeptic. Maybe that could change, but probably not. We'll see. But if you think there's anything I missed or anything I got wrong, or if you just have general thoughts, let me know in the comments below. But it's been real and it's been fun. And I'll see you all in the next one.